Welcome, colleagues. Welcome to World Obesity Day and the start of these European activities on the 4th of March 2022. It's my great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the European Association for the Study of Obesity to our special event from the MEP Special Interest Group on Obesity and Health Systems Resilience, From Words to Action, Addressing Obesity Together. I know that you've come from many different parts of Europe and from all over the world, and I know that many of you are undertaking activities around World Obesity Day. So please let us know what you're doing in the chat function so we can get a real feel for what's going on around the region and around the world as well. It's my role today to give you some housekeeping activity and to tell you about the agenda before passing on to MEP Pernilla Weiss to officially open the event. So for the housekeeping, the event today is scheduled to last 1.5 hours. Please use social media to talk about the event. So please use the hashtags Obesity Day Europe, Obesity Policy, Obesity NCD to tweet about the event. We remind you that interpretation is available. You can listen to the session discussions in English, so please select the language of your choice. We will have a dedicated Q&A session in the agenda for you to pose questions to the speakers using Slido. So for optimal viewing, please refrain from going full screen. You're invited to share your thoughts and queries in writing using the chat panel at any time. And please be aware that the meeting is being recorded live through Zoom. You can also see in the platform speaker biographies and an excellent patient gallery from the ECPO. So please take some time to look at those gallery pictures and stories and also the biographies of today's panelists. And so today's agenda is rather full. We will start with welcome and introductions. We will then talk about a joint declaration on a European framework for obesity national plans within the NCD framework before our first panel discussion, which is 1 year on from the launch of the MEP interest group. We'll then have our question session before having a second panel discussion, Healthier Together, how can we support member states to make a difference on obesity? And then we have some next steps before closing around 11 o'clock Central European time. So with that, it gives me great pleasure to hand the floor to Pernilla Weiss, MEP and chair of this MEP interest group, to officially open the event. So Pernilla, the floor is yours. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you so much, Ewan, and good morning to everybody from everywhere. I am very delighted to welcome you this Friday, sunny day in my country, Denmark, where I am right now. It's a pleasure, really, and also to be taken on board with a big amount of pride, not on my own behalf, but on the behalf of the group of the interest group with together my colleague Susanna Solis and Sarah Serdas, but especially with the team of EASO Secretariat, who really have been innovative and also very creative in doing this journey until now. That is not it's not a year since we started the interest group of MEPs, but the co-creation together with EASO, now having this day together with the rest of the world on the World Obesity Day Europe is very important. So congratulations to everybody who contributed, but also thank you very much for your strong effort. I can only underline also from personal reasons, since my first education is a nurse. So being a politician on the European Parliament now, being able to work with the very fundamental foundations beneath people and families' health, related to the very serious fact that almost 60% of plus 18-year-old Europeans are faced with either preconditions to obesity or actually are having obesity as an NCD. So we really need to pull our strengths together, also to be more united and clear to the rest of the political environment, but also as to address the many citizens, NGOs, research environments, universities, and especially also our life science and pharmaceutical industries in Europe, that the way that we from now on, after this day with the declaration in hand, can pull in the important strings that make EU the continent that really shows the rest of the world and ourselves how we can beat the severe and serious threats that obesity is. Not only must we thrive towards having the most healthy and happiest continent on the world as a proud democracy and human rights representative, but also we must be very much aligned with the many implications that it has to our healthy economy and how we can even be more innovative and create a good role model for the rest of the globe. So yes, today we launch our joint declaration, and I'm very, very happy that we do so. And now I handle over to my co-chair, Susanna Solis, who I can see sitting in sunny Brussels. So also World Obesity Day in Europe has sun in Brussels. So thank you for giving me the floor, and I look very much forward to a wonderful morning together with all of you. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, querida Pernil.
Thank you very much, dear Pernil. And thank you very much, everyone. Welcome from Brussels, from the Parliament, the European Parliament. And thank you, everyone, for making this day possible, and all these people, the participants, more than 400 participants that are here today in this World Obesity Day. But today, we shouldn't be here. And the message I want to send from the Parliament is very clear. We need to take from words, speak about this NCD that impacts more than 57% of the Europeans and is a disease like cancer and other cardiovascular diseases. Today, we don't want to just create awareness around obesity, but we want to have a roadmap so that Europe has a real roadmap and can give new opportunities. And it doesn't matter where we are, in Poland, in Spain, everyone, but just take our words and make them into action so that we have national plans in obesity in all member states that will be speaking about the diagnosis, the treatment, and the next steps. We won't have a resilient Europe if we don't speak about these important topics and we don't tackle these differences we have between member states and countries. And the first step is by identifying our barriers, the opportunities that we have, but also the best practices. In this study trip that we did in 5 different countries, we were able to do a very important analysis with patients, experts, researchers, and we were able to know the real problems, but also start new plans and new policies at a local, national, and European level. Thank you very much for your engagement. Thank you very much for your work, because the result is this declaration that we are going to be showing today. Thank you very much. I am very proud to be part of this group, to be able to help a little bit and work towards new steps to achieve our targets. We have been combating against COVID in Europe, and now we are showing with the Ukrainian crisis that we are united. And if we want to speak about obesity, we need to be united, because Europe is the right place to be united. Thank you very much. So today we are going to advance and continue our path to end obesity. And I just want to thank the EASO Association and everyone who is here today. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone. On World Obesity, for me to speak up as Vice Chair of the MEP Interest Group on Obesity and Health Systems Resilience. It is inspiring to have so many people dedicated to finding solutions to support better health outcomes for people living with obesity and those who work to make health systems fit for this purpose. And it's mostly encouraging to know that we at the EU level policymakers, with the contribution of all of you, are able to keep building back resilience by promoting evidence-based policies that can have real world impact. Obesity is currently the fourth highest independent cause of premature mortality, responsible for 8% of all deaths in the world. It is a gateway chronic disease to 20% preventable adult cancers, 35% of cardiovascular disease, and 80% of type 2 diabetes. Obviously, it is time to act together to address obesity as the major non-communicable disease that it is. Today, we launch a joint declaration towards key components that need to be included in any framework for national plans on obesity. There's emphasizing the importance of health literacy, early diagnosis, accessibility to treatment, and multidisciplinary long-term management as key pillars for any approach to this major non-communicable disease. Keeping in mind the need for continuous research efforts on better ways to tackle this worldwide threat. And lastly, we count on all of you to make the difference on fighting obesity at international, national, regional, and local level.
So, okay, thank you so much. As you can hear, we are three chairs together, very much aligned and also very much on top of all the data that also you have, all participants and your families in each organization and research environment, whoever is participating. It's a great pleasure to be so much aligned, also because Sarah and Susanna and I is covering three of the very large groups in the European Parliament, and that is why we together really can pull the European Parliament in the right direction. But we cannot do it alone, because the member states have a lot to say on the competences and how to structure the healthcare sector. So we need to do it in a way where we really engage and build up the sense of urgentness to this topic, but also that we do it in a way where people really from all member states and in the environment like to co-create with each other, that we like to be curious to watch each other, to learn and to develop new models of how to deal with obesity. So that's a very good atmosphere also to have on board for the journey onwards with this declaration. So thank you so much. Now it will be that Jacqueline is taking over now. You have a lot on your heart and some very concrete things to say, so please.
I do. Thank you so much, Pernilla, and thank you for the very kind introduction for all of the work that I think collectively we've been doing together over the last period. So I've got 15 minutes starting from now to outline the declaration, a joint declaration for a European framework for obesity national plans within the NCD framework. And all of these words absolutely carry some gravitas with them, and I'll explain why as we go. So there are a few baseline elements that we need to clear up. Now, during the whole registration process, we actually received, as you'll see, over 100 different questions from all of you, wanting to know what was in the declaration, what could be in the declaration, what was really needed. And some of you also posed the question, since when is even a disease? Well, 1948 is when the WHO, since
Dear Jacqueline,
ICD. So
Jacqueline, sorry to interrupt. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You have to share your screen. You're not sharing your screen at this point.
Okay, let me try again.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So 1948, when the World Health Organization categorized or classified obesity as a metabolic disease in the International Disease Classification Index. So, the latest version in 2021, overweight and obesity are defined as abnormal or excessive fat accumulation that may impair health. This is key for the simple reason that and we'll see this a bit later, it's how we actually choose to implement obesity and everything that goes from it. 2021, the European Commission updated and built on this, saying pre-obesity, brackets overweight, and obesity are medical conditions marked by an abnormal and or excessive accumulation of body fat that presents a risk to health. Obesity is a chronic relapsing disease, which in turn acts as a gateway to a range of other non-communicable diseases, such as diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and cancer. These are not empty political statements. These are all based on facts and scientific as well consensus. Now, very recently, as of January 1st this year, after 30 years, the International Classification of Disease Index was updated, and the obesity description is now very clear. Here, I would just highlight obesity is a chronic, complex disease. So essentially, there's a lot in, I would say, policy terminology to say we not only have scientific evidence to this effect, but that evidence has already been transposed, as it were, into a legal basis to act. And this is really key because the World Health Organization also defines a chronic disease and chronic disease management as ongoing management of conditions over a period of years and decades. So when you're able to actually take the, should we say, scientifically accurate and precise and embedded definition, it starts to make sense. Because then we start to think in terms of other NCDs where we have screening programs, early diagnosis, treatment, long-term management, because whatever the size one happens to be, once someone starts having obesity, it's lifelong. It comes in many shapes, shades, and sizes, but it's lifelong. So I'm not going to repeat the Commission's statements last year, but what I will say is there have been ramifications. Now, the latest is that on the 15th of December last year, just before the Christmas break, the Healthier Together EU Non-Communicable Diseases Initiative was launched by the Commission. Tick, we were so happy thinking obesity is already in there. The aim is to help member states reduce the burden of non-communicable diseases. Duration 2022 to 2027. Actually, that's very good as it transpires, because the published original scope has been to, as you can see, produce disease-specific NCD roadmaps for cardiovascular, diabetes, chronic respiratory diseases, and mental health, all of which are obesity acts as a gateway chronic disease. And yet obesity has been left in health determinants. and not even, but we'll come to that later. So very briefly, why all this fuss? Firstly, we were told, well, we've been addressing obesity. Have we really? And then the second point which was made was, well, don't get so hung up on having your own plan. Think how we can get through in terms of treatment and long-term management of obesity by maybe hanging it on to something else. Finish the sentence, a bit more serious. So essentially, we started thinking collectively, well, what would it mean? Why do we want to have such a plan, not just in paper, but implemented as well? So essentially, it provides a clear and comprehensive picture, a continuation, and a logical step of a policy statement or policy. It gives us a set of parameters to actually solve known issues. Why it's useful? We all talk about roadmaps, we all talk about measurements, certainly within the European Union context. We don't have that for obesity. We have snapshots of BMI at any given time. We actually have no sense of framing how this chronic disease works and how to address for better health outcomes. We don't have any targets and indicators apart from prevalence via BMI, which we all know is flawed. We're not able to predict, to identify, to allocate resources because we don't actually know what the extent of the problem is. Or problem, challenge, health status. We don't know how to lay the foundation for monitoring and evaluation beyond BMI. It becomes a very circular discussion. Obesity comes in many shapes and sizes. It matters to have an NCD framework because we know we need to move beyond BMI. We know what the science is. And now we have a policy level. We have a policy level, in inverted commas, legal basis. So 3 phases, 5 countries, over 100 stakeholders, very lively discussions. We voted a couple of days ago on all of this. Cross-cutting issues came up which need to be able to be there to actually help the implementation as an enabler to implement national plans. So underlying infrastructures, many of you will already have attended our European Health Data Space event in January that talks a lot about this in terms of allowing interoperability across geographies and related complications or precursor medical conditions. There are over 230 medical complications of obesity. There needs to be some kind of interoperability, ensuring that treatment pathway guidelines are in place, but not just in place, because we have many treatment guidelines right now, but actually implemented in law, monitored, measured, and evaluated, just like we do for the other major NCDs, to ensure that there's primary and secondary data capture, and that actually we can evaluate data to help treatment options and shared decision making. This is not about one stakeholder or other. This is about better health outcomes. So another cross-cutting element, of course, will be funding mechanisms. We're advocating collectively to base those funding mechanisms more on an approach of health outcomes. Because if we continue in the various silos of, well, this pathology or that pathology in terms of cardiovascular, in terms of diabetes, we will never, ever actually get to the root cause, and we will never actually have the resources across the board to finance this in a stepwise approach. Therefore, we're advocating for to ensure that funding instruments are in place, and also, taking into account national competences and, should we say, means to act. That we need to actually consider which health technology assessment and reimbursement principles can actually be implemented in a stepwise approach within national plans on obesity. Education. So not just medical education, but actually for everybody. So education in terms of mandatory integration of obesity, both at basic medical education as well as more advanced. Primary care healthcare professionals raised their hands. We need to know more how to diagnose, treat, support management. Also, on the other side, public awareness campaigns, which goes hand in hand with health literacy. How do you know you even have a chronic disease unless you know, and how do you actually understand what are in your medical notes unless you understand your health condition? Early diagnosis, uptake of ICD-11 chapters on obesity. How are we able to support all of that? So establishment of obesity screening programs and related guidelines, broadening the set of obesity diagnosis tools, moving beyond BMI. Think about all of those other early diagnostics from the lab, blood tests, insulin resistance, leptin, ghrelin, all of these things, which are already in existence. We're not thinking about how we can actually better the toolkit for early diagnosis because we're only thinking BMI. Treatment components. It's very easy. There's no one single form of obesity. We are advocating for access to a full portfolio of appropriate physiological and psychological treatment options, regularly updated and referenced evidence-based clinical guidelines, and of course, an infrastructure that allows multidisciplinary centers of excellence, such as, of course, EASO, for instance, has over 136 collaborating obesity management centers across WHO Europe. Why are we not even thinking about those currently? Why? Because we're not having the discussion and we don't have that sort of a framework. Also, EU accredited reference networks. So on obesity treatment and long-term management, which are interconnected with other reference networks, such as for diabetes or cancer or cardiovascular diseases, all of which are currently on the table for the complications of obesity. And of course, let's not forget registries on the table again for all NCDs apart from obesity. Then we get into long-term management components. Now here, it would be a fallacy to pretend that just because someone happens to get their weight under control, that their obesity disappears. Remember the definition: abnormally functioning and or excessive fat accumulation. So there's a real need to have a multidisciplinary case management infrastructures all the way through. And that doesn't start or stop at a dietitian. It's about having an appropriately assigned specialist, psychotherapist, physiotherapist, endocrinologist, dermatologist, anyone who is related to the long-term management of the biology and the psychology. And then, of course, there's regularly supported self-management, which was a big discussion because we have to sit there and say, what exactly do we mean by self-management? It's not one person or the other. This is about the health system and the medical team helping, supporting, and, we might also say, also non-health actors, making sure that the relevant tools are there for when the person living with obesity and their carers, their friends, their family, their workplace are not under medical supervision, but something which is interconnected back, so medical grade data that can actually support co-decision and partnering in health of the person living with obesity. And of course, complementary services that support quality of life. Almost finished. What's the timeline for all of this? Well, or even pathway, because to be frank, we don't have a timeline. And I know, we're looking forward to that discussion today to start putting that timeline in place, because officially we've got till 2027. Not really. At the moment, Healthier Together is 2 years worth of planning, neither of which currently have an NCD roadmap specifically for obesity. Let me be clear, health determinants is not obesity. So what we would like to ask for within this declaration, given that most national member states are already developing their own national plans on obesity, EU needs to catch up, to designate 2023 round of NCD roadmaps to develop the one for obesity. And the final element of all of this is to call on representatives from EU member states, of course, and particularly the European Commission's high-level steering group on NCD promotion, prevention, treatment and management to actually open the dialogue on having an NCD roadmap specifically for obesity. Because just as with other NCDs, we can't do this on our own. We've been told in the corridors very clearly, member states have to act. Great. Member states do have to act, but we also need to know who is representing us in all of this so that we can actually open that dialogue and work together across different stakeholder groups, cross-border, as well as within our respective member states. Thank you. And I do believe I'm handing back briefly to Pernilla.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. That was very, very good, taking us through the very important points and the development and also the more strategical landscape. So thank you for doing that for us. As I understand the program now, there are some questions from you, Jacqueline, to a couple of participants. Isn't that right to do that now?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think that as it looks to my schedule, it is that you are chairing these questions. So I give the floor back to you after I say thank you to you. We are so polite.
Thank you.
Let's be a little bit more robust.
I know. Thank you, Pernilla. That just gave me enough time to actually take my rearrange my screen. What can I say? So, okay, I think we're still running on schedule. So I'll say thank you very much, Pernilla. In fact, before we get to the Q&A session, what we actually have is the first panel, I do believe, which is discussing 1 year on from the launch of the MEP interest group and taking stock. So if we can move to the next segment, technical people, great. So I would actually like to keep you and Susanna on the line, bring in Mario Silva, who is the president of the Portuguese Childhood Obesity Patient Association. And I'm also hoping that Jason Halford, who's currently in Turkey, speaking at another, at our president-elect's national event for World Obesity Day. If not, if Jason isn't online as yet, because he's literally moving, then if I can bring in Ewan instead, who's our EASO Executive Director, onto the screen. He looked like he's called Jason, but never mind. For that, to actually have a bit of a discussion on where are we? You know, what have been the challenges? What have been the really positive elements of the year? Yeah. Okay, so whilst the tech team gets Ewan onto the screen, I'll begin. So essentially, it's been quite a year. Quite frankly, it's been quite. This is our third time, because I remember going into lockdown for World Obesity Day. You know, this is our third one. Now, what we have is a situation whereby we seem to have done really well on paper, but as we move back into the so-called new normal, there seems to be a bit of a rollback in terms of going back to the bad old way of doing things from our perspective, from the obesity community. So I would like to ask each of you briefly, you know, looking back on the past year, what's been the most significant for you in terms of shifting the dial towards implementing obesity as a chronic disease? And what do you think have been the barriers? So let's start with, I see Pernilla ready to go, so I'm going to start with Pernilla.
No, that I was just getting ready to unmute myself or not in terms of what you decided, Jacqueline. So no, I'm not pushing. It's a very interesting question, and also a very serious reflection that you do, that we could risk to go back to normal. And the situation in Ukraine is also shifting, of course, the focus of many of our colleagues and member states to address that crisis at the moment, because it outlines everything. But I would also say that my gut feeling is that the corona, the last 2 years, have actually boosted the awareness of how important it is for Europe, for the EU to be really health resilient. If we don't have a good foot on a platform on health and also a strong economy, we can do nothing as Europeans. And also that our values, our democracy relies on the resilience of both our health and our economy in EU. So my gut feeling is that more colleagues in the European Parliament, but also in the member states, are now aware of that no one can deal with these topics alone, but also that we need to be more innovative, not only in sense of the strategical promises and articulations, but also that now we really have to go down into the tactical and toolbox related issues and come up with promises that actually are being transformed into action, and that gives us the results that we need to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I see so many things to ask Mario in response to that. But in the first instance, I'm going to bring in, if I may, Susanna, and then Mario, think about that innovation piece and how that's been working during COVID and shifting the dial in Portugal. Yep, Susanna.
Bueno, sí, muchas gracias. Como decía Pernil, yo estoy totalmente de
Yes, thank you so much. As Pernil was saying, I was totally in agreement. This is the right moment right now. We know that Europe has to walk together towards European Union's in health, that we need to focus on our efforts. And in the case of obesity, we need to invest in innovation. And we can only do this if we gather our strengths together. This is the right moment. Europe needs to be more resilient. We need to treat this disease, and we need to move over in research and working together. And this is the opportunity of all the fundings of structural and recovering. We need to help the member states to finance these treatments. And this is something that we also have the great opportunity with the European funds. We can talk about this later, but we need to be able to use this funding to invest in health and innovation.
Yeah. And I think we absolutely do need to come back to that, because, we have this sticking point in terms of everything, significant amounts being allocated towards the recovery and resilience funds. And also, very importantly, being allocated, certainly from an EU as well as structural fund perspective, for access to, or equitable access to, treatment and long-term management of NCDs. So pregnant silence. But in the meantime, I'm going to bring back Mario and welcome Ewan as well. Thank you for joining. So I'm going to bring in Mario and say, how has the last year been for you? Because obviously childhood obesity has been, a major word, major phrase. But in Portugal, you have had a very specific obesity national plan since 2004 along the life course. Have you noticed a shift during the last year, and particularly because our vice chair, as you know, Sarah Serdas, is Portuguese and has definitely been championing both at national and EU level. So over to you. What has been your experience?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and hearing that finally Europe is uniting to give a proper answer to address obesity. Well, as you know, Portugal launched the National Obesity Plan in 2004. And until then, all the people that were living with obesity were also carrying this burden that their disease was not recognized or treated as such. So after that, there was some first steps addressing this problem. For example, in my case, I had a grandmother that lived more than 30 years with obesity without getting any treatment. For her, this national plan was not coming at the right time to save her life. But many other lives changed it, especially because there was a really investment at the time on obesity surgeon treatment centers. So many people had the opportunity to make surgery. But as you know, this doesn't address to all obesity patients. It's only for severe obesity. Of course, it was also made some investment in prevention, especially with children. And of course, there were results in the last decade. The prevalence, as we were talking about, based on the BMI, decreased. So especially with children with pre-obesity, was a decrease in the last 10 years. But now more things need to be done. The last year and the last 2 years, because of COVID, I realized that this was actually the turning point for some of the politicians and the decision makers, because during, for example, the vaccination period, obesity was really framed as any other NCD, because these patients needed to be vaccinated in priority, because they were at risk, because they had this disease. And finally, it was addressed to all people living with obesity in all sizes, as we already said that. So Portugal was, in the last year, was approved recommendation for the government, for all the parties in the parliament in Portugal, so that we really could go to the next level so that, for example, the next step on the National Obesity Plan would include early diagnosis, reimbursement of medication, and of course the creation of multidisciplinary teams in primary care so that we can really address to every people living with obesity and improving their lives. So I'm really hoping that this not change because we had recently elections. So we will have a new government, but led by the same prime minister. So I really hope that this gets into the next national obesity plan, updating so that it could fit for more people living with obesity, helping more people lives getting better.
Okay, wonderful. And I think, Mario, that that is just so fantastic because you're able to demonstrate the difference it makes to real people and real lives when there is a structure. So, and along the life course, and not just cherry picking essentially what could be something, loudest voice. And I think also that you make an extremely good point that should basically be independent of who's in power. It shouldn't be down to one person or other's personal whim, which is actually what happens right now. And then the third element that I picked up on, and I'm about to bring in Ewan, although I see Jason is around, but you already heard this part of the conversation. It also should be, should we say, not a short-term vision of somebody, but actually making sure that there is an infrastructure, which of course means resources attached. So there, I'd like to bring in Ewan, because one of the points which is very clearly raised during the as part of the declaration, and everybody around has said sustainability, resilience, workforce, and education for health professionals. EASO, at the end of the day, we're a health professionals association. We hear all the time. So could you say a bit about how the last year and the actual, the work that we've been doing in partnership with the MEP interest group has impacted on skills and or education within the obesity community?
Yes, thank you very much, Jacqueline. And I think the words that you used there that are most important here are infrastructure. And I think we know that there is a huge challenge in terms of numbers. And we also know that there aren't sufficient health professionals available and trained to meet that need. And there aren't a sufficient number of specialist multidisciplinary centres available. So I would like to see it as a next step, both in terms of national implementation and European implementation, really a drive to improve the level of education in obesity from undergraduate level all the way through all different types of training, because there really is a knowledge gap and there is a personnel gap. So we need to do something about that. And I think that really speaks to the concept of resilience. We have a chronic disease which is affecting well over 50% of the European population, and yet it's not treated properly as an NCD, and we don't have the infrastructure to offer the levels of care that we need. And I really think that this MEP interest group has an opportunity to do something about it. I see the drive and the ambition of this interest group, and it really gives me a lot for the future. And I think infrastructure is one thing, but infrastructure in terms of education, in terms of research, and I think also in terms of the implementation of national plans. It's one thing to have a national plan written and developed and shiny and glossy, but implementation is where things will really make a difference. And I mean implementation of educational strategies, implementation of research and funding and infrastructure, and then of course the implementation of the national plans themselves. So as it represents professionals working in this field, certainly my call to action would be around education and research, but also implementation of national plans.
Yeah, exactly. And there, I'd actually like to bring, I see both Susanna and Pernilla nodding away on the implementation. If I may, I'd actually like to bring back that topic to something, very clearly embedded within dossiers going on within the European Parliament. So implementation will actually not just affect should we say, obesity policy, it will affect or impact on any policies that can affect or impact health outcomes on obesity and related complications. So here, I'd like to bring in Susanna, because you've recently been elected as the coordinator for regional policies. Another congratulations. And I'm going to come back on farm strategy for you, Pernilla. So, but, and also coming from Spain, it is a country which gives a lot of power, morning, Jason, gives a lot of power to the regions or a lot of competence in terms of implementing. So, what are your thoughts on all of this? Because we certainly know that when we started talking with the Spanish community preparing the study trip, it got quite interesting, because it was like dealing with Belgium, lots of different countries in one country. So what are your thoughts on this? What can the regions be doing?
Sí, gracias, Jacqueline, porque esa es una de las grandes...
Thank you, Jacqueline. That is one of the very large difficulties, great difficulties, but also an opportunity to treat obesity. Most of the health competencies, the skills are at the national and regional levels. They're autonomous regions that they have these skills. So that's why it's so important to support regions. And I think it's also very important funding, as I said before, the funding of regional development, and that I am a coordinator, and I'm part of this in the European Parliament, because this is an opportunity. On one side, we have the funding of regional development that we can help them, to support our infrastructures, and then there is the social European funding to help in the training. One of the points that is more important is the need of the training of the health personnel and the rest of the personnel, of course, and then to be aware for the citizens that we may have a chronic disease, for the general public. So I'm committed that within the European fundings of the regional developments to have very clear that one of the priorities is to treat obesity, as what it is. Right now, we have the opportunity to do it well and to really use this funding when they're using the regions, and also the role of the regional fundings. They represent the regions, is very near to all Europe. And I think that we need to work together with them to make this declaration of today to be successful.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's almost as though we just need to transpose the word obesity from health determinants into NCD, and all of this gets unlocked, literally unlocked. Pernilla, and I'm going to bring you in briefly, Jason, as well. So Pernilla, I'm also going to ask you again, because part of implementation will be access to innovative treatments. One of the, not just medication, but everything that goes around it. So my question, and diagnostics, everything basically that the pharmaceutical strategy for Europe is about to be dealing with. So my question is, how does this fit in terms of the declaration and current thought on what the EU pharmaceutical strategy should look like? Because we're really happy that obesity made it in as an NCD into the latest version of the reports, it has to be said. But same thing happened with cancer. And then it got deleted by the time we got to the Baker Special Committee report. So how can we avoid that this time? What's the case?
Oof, that's a very, very question, because it addresses some of the challenges that we face in the political environment, that when we talk about health-related issues that we do now, we sometimes get a little angle blinded by the fact that we are addressing the need for a lot of initiatives to be done, a lot of money to be spent in another way. So the front loading of our economy is related to the other committee that I'm also a part of. I'm a member of the ENVI committee, but also the ITRA committee, where you find industry policy and research policy. And I really think that one of the challenges of the debate around the pharmaceutical strategy was that too few colleagues in the European Parliament didn't realize that this we are doing is also actually industrial policy. So if we want all the things to happen that are in the pharmaceutical strategy, but also in the EU Beat Cancer strategy, et cetera, we need also to address what are the important tools and incentives and fundamental legal framework for the life science industry to choose EU as their home, because we cannot make our wishes come true if we firstly do not address how we can boost the European competitiveness and make our economy stronger and bigger. But also we need the right companies, the right research environments, the right university profiles to actually also be a part of this co-creative team in between politicians, industries, and strong patient organizations. And I think that's something that we, with the declaration in hand, can do more about. And right now in the spring, we are having an open initiative report in the European Parliament called very, very classically the industrial strategy. And I really hope that Susanna and Sarah and other colleagues will help us to really put in sector-specific needs for what is the fundamental grid to the EU industrial policy that also addresses back to the declaration and the needs to be done on behalf on the health resilience related to obesity. It's so important, and that is also where we can wake more urgency from colleagues that are not having healthcare related issues at the very close of their heart, because politics is a lot of different topics. So I really think that's important, Jacqueline. So thank you for taking up this question also, because we are good at saying what we would like to do and have done better, but we also need to address how do we get the means to do it, and money is a part of the equation.
Exactly. And I couldn't agree more, but I'm going to bring in the last person to this party today, Jason, very briefly, because as president of EASO, obviously you have a view, but I'm actually going to pick up a little bit more on your professional background as a psychologist. So that's where you come. And one of the things that we've seen, certainly with the patient voice, if you ask one patient, and I was having this discussion the other day with Bart van der Schuren, who's coming on a bit later, because everyone wants to talk about the medication, about bariatric surgery, about erroneously eat less, move more. But if you ask most patients, will actually say, and I'm one off in my own life, as it were, would actually say, actually, it was the psychotherapy, because we all know how to lose the weight in the way that things are done right now, but actually, what happens then? What happens with our cortisol levels? What happens with the fight or flight response? What happens with the mindfulness as we go through our day, and actually really long-term coping strategies? Certainly in Belgium, which was a sticking point in the study trip, and in most other countries, psychology or psychotherapy not reimbursed. In Belgium, we're at 11 euros. Big discussion. So for me, why was it so important from your perspective, maybe to explain a bit as to why it's so important, not just to have the nice phrasing of multidisciplinary treatment and long-term management, but why psychology? Why should it be in there?
Well, it's interesting because I self-identify as an obesity researcher, not as a psychologist, and sometimes I need to be reminded of that because I manage a psychology department, and they like to point that out to me occasionally. But you know, when you talk to people living with obesity, and to self-confess, I am living with obesity, although my BMI is of a different range currently. You realize the importance of life stories and life events. Nobody's weight creeps up like that. The curve, you can spot periods of stress and thing in people's lives. And often we know that actually people do not succeed on treatment, or don't succeed in the way they like to, if we don't deal with psychological issues up front. And actually, could be more important to deal with that and gain a bit of weight before going into the weight loss phase. Now, living with food is stressful for people living with obesity. You know, we know there is a relationship between mental health and obesity anyway, but often, you know, food is there and it is a way of coping. It's a way of coping with life. You know, when you have stress, you know, temptations become much more orientated. Your reward system is driving you to those. You don't have an adequate appetite system anyway, which is stressful. And then quickly temptations can feed into lapses, and then lapses have a negative impact. It reduces your feelings of self-efficacy, and it's a vicious cycle. Okay. And I think one of the important things that psychology can contribute, as well as helping people have some insight into their behavior, is really stressing that obesity, it's a biological disease, but it has a very big mental component. And this is why stigma is such a bugbear for me, because there's this idea that through society that stigmatizing obesity will in any way deal with the problem, when actually we know it makes things much worse. It's terribly frustrating for me. And I see so many ill-educated policymakers say so many hurtful things that really do not help. And that is why I'm so glad to be working at EASO with this MEP group, because I think this is a really I'd like to see.
Exactly. And I was going to say exactly, because we're about to have to shuffle on to the next one. But I was going to say as well, particularly because it's weight bias and weight stigma. So actually people who may not be showing the symptom of weight at any one time end up with even worse inverted weight bias and weight stigma. So looking at the symptom instead of actually the biology, which is the disease. So on that note, I think I'm being shoveled through at this point to actually go into your questions. You know, really, really interesting discussion as to, you know, what are the barriers? Both, I would say, internal cuisine within the parliament, as well as the broader societal and at national level. So on that note, I would actually like to bring in the other panelists for today, because as I said, we have had over 100 questions as part of the registration process. And I'm hoping that I'm seeing more people on camera now. Tech team? Please tell me I am. I'll keep going. Exactly. I think so. Okay, so I'll keep going, because what we did, if you go to Slido at hashtag 937008, you will actually see a list of questions. And these were some of the top questions which were posed to us during the registration process. And what we want to be able to do is actually address some of them, but we don't have that long. So you need to start upvoting, like we do on Reddit or wherever. You need to start upvoting which questions you would actually like to see answered. So in the meantime, And I'm hoping I've got that correct, tech team. Somebody please tell me that I have. Yeah. They're all very silent. Somebody put their hand up there. Okay, so what we're going to do then, in the meantime, as we start seeing upvotes, I'm going to take the chair's prerogative. Okay, I see more people arriving. So Ewan is there as well. Great. What we're going to do is actually see what kinds of answers we have. And we have 10 minutes for this segment. So please do start up voting. Okay, so if I may, great, I'm starting to see. Okay, so if I may, if I get going straight with, in terms of, let's start with an easy one. Collaboration beyond the usual suspects. That was one of the big ones which came in. So I'm going to ask the question to the panelists to say, how can we encourage and better foster cross-sector partnerships to address obesity-related goals? That one may be for those of you, Susanna and Pernilla, who are both sitting on STOA, the scientific committee, and also Mario, whose background is marketing. How do we work together better? Ewan, feel free to jump in, and then everyone's voting, so I'll be able to pick one of the others.
Well,
Ewan?
I think Jacqueline, we might need to ask that to specific people, because there are two panels on the session today, and you can't merge them. They have to be one panel and then the next panel. So it's not possible to have 12 people on a panel. No, it's a maximum of one panel at a time. So it might be that you ask the question specifically to people. I mean, I personally think there is a real need for integration across disciplines, and this is something that EASO does at the scientific and medical level by working with our fellow professional organizations to make sure that obesity is integrated into the discussion, into education across all sectors where obesity is important. And of course, we know that obesity causes most NCDs. There's a list of 200 plus complications of obesity. So that means a lot of different professional organizations and specialisms are involved. So we work at a scientific research and education level to really talk with our stakeholders at a multidisciplinary level. And I would hope and suggest that also happens at a policy level as well. But I would hand the floor to our great policymakers who are on the session today to respond to that. And perhaps Mario might want to talk about what they do at the national level as well. Jacqueline.
Mm-hmm. Mario?
Okay. Yes. Okay, so I can really add to this point that in order to achieve the goals that we want to achieve, which is addressing obesity for every person, everyone has to do something. So the policymakers, of course, have to create the framework that can make this happening for the healthcare professionals to treat everyone in the national health systems, but also the NGOs can make a role. And I can talk, for example, about what we are doing. Our NGO is working with many organizations, public organizations, private organizations, even the industry, together to create this model that we offer for free to every school, for example. In our case, our project Fruit Heroes is now registering the participation of more than 500,000 children in the last 10 years. I was seeing here a question about how do we make this without reinventing the wheel? I was thinking on an experiment that we had very recently. We tried to adapt our Portuguese program to be piloted in other countries. So, for example, with EU funding, Erasmus funding, we had this opportunity to bring our project with local partners, with a mix like schools, NGOs, also governmental institutions, and we bring this project to places like Cyprus, Greece, Italy, and even Turkey. And surprisingly, the results in terms of education, awareness of the population for understanding obesity as a disease, and also to educate children and families to the basic prevention needs. So the recommendations of WHO, the results were really close to those in Portugal. So for me, and we were talking about infrastructure, so guidelines, national plans, it doesn't need to be each country doing it for themselves. We are united. This worked for a very recent crisis, as we've seen with COVID. So if we make the same kind of guidelines, we standardized the procedures, we will succeed, and in a very, very much shorter time. So for me, that is the way to do. It's partnership between countries and partnership between institutions and with researchers on board.
Exactly. And in fact, you made a really big segue into one of our the other top voted question. So here I'm going to go with Susanna as part of STOA. What do policymakers need from researchers, and how can researchers know this and deliver? What evidence do you need? What's going to help you?
Sorry, this is a question for me,
yes,
because I had a problem with the interpretation. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I say again, what do policymakers need from researchers, and how can researchers know this and deliver?
Bueno, voy a ser muy breve para dejar tiempo. Yo creo que hay una cosa fundamental de la que hemos hablado.
Very brief to leave time. I think this is fundamental. We need data, we need evidence, we need to estimate the cost of the new action. I always say this is very important to know what is the cost of not doing anything, and then not to struggle to research about the disease. So an important study is going to research of impact of the cost of the no action, and we also need data to be able to later to legislate, to be able to coordinate actions, and especially to share data is so important, I think, for research, future research. Very brief, you know, to be able to also let other people to speak.
Indeed, and I think you hit the nail on the head. And this is something which we're really hoping that STOA will pick up, the scientific advisory committee within the European Parliament. And to be frank, I think it would be something which would also be extremely useful going towards the NCD plan, as we heard in January from OECD as well, with Michele Cecchini, sorry. So okay, so I think we've covered the two highest. There are so many other questions that we need to ask, but time is running out, and we've all been waiting, because I'm sure, you know, Isabel de la Mata, Bart van der Schuren, and Sophie Joly and Fatima Kartu have all been listening really patiently. And now we are moving through with Susanna chairing into the second and final panel, which is Healthier Together. How can we support member states to make a difference on obesity? Over to you, Susanna, and tech team.
So this is the second panel now.
Yes, we are.
This is how much time we have for this panel?
You've got 25 minutes.
Okay, so thank you very much. It's an honor for me to moderate it, and very happy to have the European Commission represented here by my compatriot Isabel de la Mata, who has always taken a practical and knowledgeable approach. Welcome, Isabel. I also want to welcome Fatima Kartu. She is a referent doctor for public health and nutrition in the French Mutuality Federation. Anne-Sophie Joly, from France, represented the patients. And we have also today Bart van der Schuren. He is Chief Executive Officer in Materialize, which is a company that provides innovative solutions for the health sector. Welcome to all of you. This is how we can support national policymakers in taking up the discussion on an NCD roadmap for obesity based on the joint declaration key components. And I would like to raise the first question to all of you. If you can respond in maximum 2 minutes and about what will be, in your experience, the key factor for policymakers to be incentivized for establishing a non-communicable an NCD roadmap for obesity. What factor do you think that is going to be essential to prioritize obesity in the political agenda? Isabel, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Well, this is a difficult question, but the first thing that I wanted to say is that we are not doing specific roadmaps for specific diseases. I have seen that in one of the slides by Jacqueline, but it's not what the European Commission is proposing. So just to avoid any mistake, what we are doing is to work in 5 strands that share an integrated approach while allow at the same time specific actions addressing the particular challenges of main disease domain. But regarding the member states, I think that we have been already working with the member states and especially with the joint actions. And the best example is the best remap joint action that was launched 2 years ago, and that support the implementation of best practices in the area of nutrition. So I think that for the national or for the local politicians, well, let's talk about money. Working on that is going to save you money, and you never save money because you invest in other things, but you could use better your money, and you could have more done with the same amount. Then, second, I mean, you have a healthier population. If you have a healthier population, you will have happier people, you will have consumers happier, you will have a longer life, less use of healthcare resources, and I mean, it's a win-win for everybody. So the only thing for the people at the member states, the authorities, is that they need to think in the long term, not just in the short term, not just for tomorrow, because tomorrow you will not have any result. You will need to think on 5, 10, 20 years long, or the activities that you implement now will deliver and will deliver good, but not tomorrow. So be aware of that, and you need to be convinced that maybe it will not be in your term in the office, but will be for the next politician that will replace you, and the authorities will ever be there. So, and that this is an integral approach. That now that we are talking about One Health integrated approaches in all the areas. I mean, this area is one where you can see how integrated approaches and One Health, work, because you have the farm to fork, you have nutrition, you have physical activity, you have the Green Deal, you have a lot of different issues that at the end will repercute in this area and will help you to fight or to treat the obesity. Over.
Thank you very much, Isabel. And the same question for Fatima. Welcome, Fatima. Thank you for joining us today.
Bonjour, merci de donner
Good morning. Thank you so much for giving the microphone to the French Federation to talk about this subject about public health. Maybe that you have some feedback. I know that 1 adult in 5 is obese in France, and that reduces the life expectancy of French people by 2 to 3 years. But on top of this reduction of life expectancy, there's a problem of obesity, and overweight has a cost of a 5% on the global budget, the French global budget. And today, what we do already in France is that it's been more than 20 years that we have implemented an action plan, the Nutrition and Health National Plan, and with partners. And equally, in 2010, we implemented an obesity plan, and all of that has allowed to create concrete tools that are operational, like the Nutri-Score, or we had also prevention campaigns. We implemented a special tax on soda products, but there are still other efforts that we must make. And in France, the engine that pushes the quality, and our first partner of the state about prevention and health questions and public health, I heard very well what Belgium said, and I would like to react to that, actually. So this mutuality that we implemented, the reimbursement of psychology consultations, because for us, it is a sector that allows to respond to this problem of public health, that is obesity and overweight. In the same fashion, we are implementing a program on mental health of youth in the rural areas in France that suffer from obesity. All of this to be more concrete, but I would like to also say that today, with the state, our wish is to also regulate the bariatrics surgery that has exploded in our country. We went from 3,000 in 2017 to 60,000 in 2021. We definitely want to put an end of social disparities, because at 6 years old, the children are already affected by obesity. And we have also social inequalities at the heart of the hexagon. And I would like to also talk about whether we should actually have an action at the heart of the European Union that works with public health. So we would like to have the Nutri-Score and other tools made mandatory. As you know, and you're listening to me, the validity and efficiency of the Nutri-Score in the prevention of obesity and chronic diseases have been shown by different scientific research. By scientific researchers and independently, and these data were shared publicly. So we have already seen this in France, that Nutri-Score that is implemented in a nutritional policy that is quite ambitious in the European Union to fight against obesity and other diseases associated with obesity, like diabetes 2, cardiovascular, hypertension, all diseases that are associated with overweight, rural overweight and obesity. And I would like to also insist on something that really gets to me, because I've worked with these populations a lot, is that the Nutri-Score is particularly efficient in unfavorable populations, because it is a tool to fight against social inequalities. And in France, we still have the doors open, saying that obesity is particularly more frequent in unfavorable populations. And and as a prevention actor, I would like to say that if obesity costs a lot of money, prevention is better, is less costly. And so let us develop the prevention. And I would like to finish by saying that all of this has to be inscribed one else. And I would just want to thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your answer. And we are running out of time, so we will try to keep to our time. The next question is for Anne-Sophie. Anne-Sophie, in 2 minutes, what do you think is going to be essential to prioritize obesity in the political agenda from the patient's perspective? Hello? Anne-Sophie? I don't know if he's...
Yes.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, the question was, what do you think is going to be essential to prioritize obesity on the political agenda?
Should we move over to Bart?
Okay, we can move to Bart. Bart, could you answer in 2 minutes? What do you need from us?
Yeah. First of all, I would like to correct something. I'm not an engineer. I'm an endocrinologist at a university obesity clinic of Leuven in Belgium. And I'm also the president of the Belgian Association for the Study of Obesity. But I think what will really incentivize politicians in the end is the patients, but also healthcare professionals. But in order to do that, in order to emancipate the patients, we need to have a better understanding of this disease. So it's no surprise as president of a scientific organization that I want to stress the fact that where Europe can really make a difference is to invest massively in more research and collaborative research between the different member states. And that's where I think Europe may play a role, because the money needed for this kind of research, but also the collaborative platforms needed for this kind of research are at a European level, not at a national level. So foster research, and then you will emancipate patients, and then you will have a real incentive to tackle obesity.
Thank you very much.
Bonjour et merci de nous donner la parole. Le collectif agit en tant que
Thank you
patient
for
sur des
giving me the
associations.
floor.
Bonjour, vous m'entendez?
Can you hear me?
Agit depuis
The
22 ans.
collective has been acting for
Oui, je vous entends.
22 years. Yes, I can hear you.
Oui, est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oui, je l'ai. Oui, tout à fait.
Yes,
Merci
absolutely.
de nous donner la parole et la
Thank you for giving us the floor.
Allô, vous m'entendez?
Okay, can you hear me?
Oui, on vous entend. Allez-y.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Est-ce que il y a un problème, c'est que moi j'entends, j'ai mon micro.
There's a problem. I have my mic, but
Regarde. Non, c'est une blague tout. Tu vois?
that good?
Attends. Vous savez parler anglais et écrire en anglais? Est-ce que tu peux leur dire en anglais qu'ils m'ont coupé le
Can you
micro?
tell them in English
Moi, j'ai
that
pas accès au micro. S'il te plaît.
Susanna wants to take the floor. Please let her in.
Yeah. And in the meantime, the voice from behind, Jacqueline, because obviously I've been listening all the way through, and we are also right at time. So I think that there's the main element. Sorry. The main element that we need to the main element that we need to establish here, in the clear message that seems to be coming through, is that we need a structure to be able to know who actually, well, the research piece, secondly, what to research, how to research, when to research. Secondly, we also need a structure, as Fatima quite rightly said, to be able to rationalize spending. Thirdly, it's quite clear that as far as the European Commission is concerned at this stage, but Isabel, we have time to have those discussions. It's quite clear that at this point in time, although there's a very clear list as to which, should we say, current major NCDs are in the frame, along with mental health next year, to have a discussion on roadmaps, which includes comorbidities and all these sorts of things. However, it's also clear that only talking about nutrition and physical activity is not actually addressing obesity. So from what was being said in the panel so far, I think it's safe to say that having a declaration which doesn't just say we would like to have this, but having a declaration that sets out very clearly what are the key components that could and should be going into such a roadmap discussion, perhaps, and I'm about to hand over to you, Pernilla, to close with your last reflections, perhaps that we now have enough of a basis to actually start that discussion, which won't be this year. You know, it's because, you know, that particular train is rolling. But can it be a discussion to open for next year above and beyond nutrition and physical activity, which are generalized goods, but it's not actually addressing the question of obesity?
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. And I will try to be very, very brief. Yes, we don't have to wait till next year because we have the upcoming EU health data space file. We have also the care strategy coming up. And as I announced, we are currently working on an industrial strategy, and it might not have the lingo that is related to the health discourse, but it is all about how we create the legal framework, the economic incentives to really make our economy grow in the right direction, addressing all the issues needed to be supported and developed and innovated in terms of health. So yes, there is a lot for us to do right now. And I very much would like to address just shortly that the key point is for now that Sarah and Susanna and I continue to have good talks with both the EASO environment, with all the stakeholders, but especially, and I would very much like to address that as something that we really must take on board now after the study days, that we build up the relationships between us as MEPs with the national politicians, but also, and that is maybe the most important finding that I did myself, with the regional and municipality politicians, because I was so lucky to speak with colleagues on the political levels that covers all matters related to health and especially to obesity. And it was a kind of an eye-opener for us to see we need to act as a team, but also to act cross-party and across country. So I would very much like to say that is on our agenda on the political calendar as well also. So we will have a lot to do in 2022. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here, and also to you, Jacqueline, your team, and especially warm thank you to you, Susanna, for hosting the last session, although speeded up because of time frame. Take care, everybody, and thank you for applauding the declaration. We really can use it in the upcoming work to do ahead of us. So just stay firm and stay steady on the pathway. Thank you.
Merci.
You're welcome. Susanna, do you want to have a very short closing hello from your side? You were out of space and then you came back again. That was very good.
Sí, muy rápidamente, gracias.
Yes, thank you very much, Neil. I am very sorry I have some connection issues and I have been taken out of Zoom. I just wanted to let you know that this declaration is available. You can see through the Parliament's website. This is our first step, but we need to continue working, as Neil said, and we are going to work within the member states, between different countries. We are going to still work with EASO, and the interpreter is hearing a hot mic. We are still working with the European Union, and we are going to speak about the treatment and how to manage it long term. We are going to work with the regional committees. We are going to engage them in this declaration and our outcomes. This is our first step, but we're not saying this step. We are going to continue working and progressing together. Thank you very much.